We're going to talk about something that is right up to date. The problem was just created yesterday. Oh no, I'm making a mistake there. It was created 5,000 years ago. And that is when governments screw up and make things difficult and they interfere in the market. Believe it or not, even 5,000 years ago they understood about market because markets are pretty natural. And there's bartering and all kinds of things. And then they had government money, and all of a sudden there were problems, and they've existed ever since. The wage and price controls, that is to solve the problems of all the mistakes that the government makes. That's how I look at it. And guess what? It makes things worse. And you never would have guessed that when the politicians get involved in trying to correct the mistakes that they made, sometimes it's deliberate, sometimes it's out of total ignorance, but they generally make things much worse. It's interesting. It is a big deal in history and in economics, the wage and price control. And, I'm not all that old, but I do remember three major times that wage and price controls were introduced in this country, and a lot of minor times too. But the major times was, I remember World War II very clearly. My dad was in the retail dairy business and would sell butter, and we as little kids knew about stamps, rationing stamps, and we'd have to collect the stamps and the money if somebody came to our little dairy, which was actually at our house. We had to do both, collect the money and collect the stamps. So we learned about that very early on, and then I finally figured it out later on that all that activity had nothing to do with helping the people. The purpose was, along with selling war bonds, the war bonds, we need your help. But that isn't the way they finance the war. They finance the war with printing money, and then they'd come up with this to bring people together. Everybody's going to have food rationing and whatnot. I'll tell you what, just from personal experience, it didn't even operate there, because I had some family members, including my dad, who was really strict by the rules. You follow the rules and you don't mess around with a government regulation. But I can recall him that when the people that would bring the meat into town, the black market meat that wasn't available anywhere, and everybody knew they were coming. So on Saturday afternoon, everybody crowded around. The interesting part that dawned on me years later was it was across the street from the police station, and but people would go there. So people got around it, and it was in order to get people to join in the effort, and maybe it was to distract by who's causing what kind of trouble. Second time, Korea War. Wage and price controls then, and that wasn't as bad as what happened in World War II. But the one that I remember very clearly was in the early 1970s when Bretton Woods broke down, and the prices were going up rapidly. And Nixon, that was one of the reasons the Bretton Woods broke down. They couldn't maintain this fake gold standard any longer, so they put on wage and price controls to control things from getting out of hand. And of course that didn't solve the problem at all. But the one thing I remember clearly about that, I remember the day the wage and price controls were put on, which would have been like the 16th of August, the day afterwards. The rules were written, and all of a sudden the prices were controlled, and all of a sudden all the business people had to think about, to replace what they had, whether it was gasoline or whatever. The prices would go up a lot, and it was and the markets went down, and the unemployment was really a mess. To me, it was the one time when I could see the difference between a mismanaged economy, a central economically planned economy that was failing, and there was relative liberty, versus the time there was no pricing. They destroyed the pricing mechanism, and it shut down everything quickly, so it was just overnight. Of course, it lasted a year or two, and it was never smooth, and those ideas have never gone away. I would say, Chris, today we don't have quite the same, But price controls and interference by the government is always messing around with the prices. Today it's in a way more sinister because it's directed to one company versus another company. It's used with protectionism and sanctions and these sort of things, always interfering with the most important thing in an economy. You can't run a voluntary economy without voluntary pricing. So that's why it's so damaging. And I'll talk about this in a minute a little bit more, but the most important price is actually the price of money, the interest rates. If you mess around with the interest rates, guess what? You can end up with a really, really rocky economy, and I think that's what's happening to us right now. Yes, and there is one time when price control is put on. Is not exactly like what we're talking about here, but it's similar because the government's always messing up with regulations and with the regulations have and the inflation exists. And that is what happens during a hurricane. We live along the coast and we see hurricanes. They come and go. Sometimes the threat is very great, greater than what the storms actually are. But it's always a problem because guess what? People know that they might get locked down, locked in their homes, and so they need goods and services. So all of a sudden, the shelves are empty, the gas pumps are gone, and filling up your cars, which is natural, and there's nothing abnormal about that. But the whole thing is the customers get angry because some people will sneak some goods and services in, and they will raise the price. And they are the gougers, they're price gougers, taking advantage of these terrible situations that nature have created. And the government has to do something about that. It's not the people's fault. They dismiss the fact that the monetary system might play a role in it. But anyway, they come in and they put on these controls and you become an evil person if you stayed up all night, drove a truck, through bad weather and still just barely opening the doors to get in to help people, hauling in some goods and services and fuel, and he says, I'm going to charge you more. Let's just say he doubles the price of it. And most people are anxious to see it, and they do it, and they say, oh, that's terrible. He should be a humanitarian and do it for the same amount, even though he can't produce it for the same amount. So they do that. They raise the prices, and it's not all that bad, because that means that there are shortages. If you allow the market to work, guess what? A day or two after somebody gouged all those people, somebody says, boy, I'm going in there. I'm going to take a load of lumber in. There's a shortage of lumber, and it's very expensive, and I can provide this, and I can make some money doing it. So the price is going up motivates the increase in supply, but it never dawns on them. The evil is always because somebody raised the price. In the same way with labor. What if they needed laborers and it was under dire conditions, and you go in there, instead of making your $10 an hour, you got to make $20 an hour. That's what labor was costing not too long ago. But they could go in there and make more. So the motivation there solves the problem. But that doesn't satisfy the bureaucrat. The bureaucrat has to be the one, even if they contributed to the problem, they have to be the ones that are solving the problem. And of course, guess what? The politician and bureaucrats make the conditions much worse.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information, and it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
Do you want to know one thing about crypto? I made over 3,000% in profit in a few weeks. Fact is, the traditional financial system, the traditional money system makes you poor, not rich. If you want to earn $500,000, $1 million, you have to wait until you're 50, 60, 70 in the traditional financial system, and you probably will still be broke. And you will be old. This is not a sexy combination, as you can imagine. But the question is, how can you start in crypto and make these profits? Where to invest? Where to start? My name is Gunnar and I'm from Germany, as you can hear, and things are a little bit different in Germany. More about that later on. Fact is, there are lots of different cryptocurrencies. It's a gigantic universe where beginners and professionals get easily lost. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are 7 key steps you need to follow to become successful in this market. You have to know them, and if you fail one of them, it's literally impossible to succeed in this market. Just an example, one of the key points is your exchange, and one of the biggest are, for example, Binance and Coinbase. These are trusted and well-established exchanges, but, and this is a big but, you won't find the super profitable coins on those exchanges. The unknown super profitable coins that get gigantic profits are not traded on those kind of exchanges. They are traded on much smaller insider platforms that are barely known. And I can tell you what those super secret exchanges are and why they are so profitable. And another super important thing are the right information sources. The point is, the internet is gigantic. There are hundreds and hundreds of YouTube channels, blogs, pages, and much more. And there are also market makers and influencers. For example, Elon Musk, he is not a crypto guy, but the moment he recommended Dogecoin, it went through the roof, to the moon, so to say. But why did he recommend it? Where did he hear it from? He didn't hear it from newspapers. And believe me, he is listening to someone. But you have to know who, and you have to react before he is reacting. This is really important. And these are only 2 of the 7 steps you have to follow in order to be successful in crypto. And if you want to know all of these steps in much more detail, and if you want to have a comprehensive checklist, here's what you should do. There is a link below this video. Click on this link and you will get the opportunity to subscribe to my channel. Click on the link and you will see a video where I explain the next steps. So see you soon. Click on the link now. I'll see you there.